Big Sills! Conan and I were just talking baseball. And I was talking to him about one of my favorite leagues of all time, the Negro Leagues. And he was talking about what Bobby Valentine said the other day about having baseball expand to Japan. How would that look? It could be great. Look at what the NBA is now doing. You got the number one player in the NBA draft, a foreign player. You got the number one player in the sport, a foreign player. The San Antonio Spurs, great dynasty, were all foreign players, really. Duncan, Ginobili, Tony Parker. Those guys were all foreign players. You're seeing the absolute thing that David Stern wanted. That was to build the brand abroad. The NBA is enormous in China right now. Asian countries love the NBA. That's where a lot of the economic money comes from. And by the way, now that the Saudis are able to invest, the NBA, whether or not they get giant ratings or not, it's not going to matter because there's going to be a financial investment from the Saudis. And this is what baseball has to do. There's a ton of money. And, we were talking a little bit about Shohei Ohtani. Shohei Ohtani may not be the greatest baseball player of all time, but he's the greatest talent I've ever seen in baseball history. And you can go back into the 20s and into the teens. Nobody's ever seen anything like this, including Babe Ruth. Ruth didn't have to travel to the West Coast. He never went past the Mississippi River, albeit he was on trains. You didn't have to go and do the things that Ohtani's doing now. Ohtani, well, and you know what's crazy? Here's one of the most incredible things about the Shohei Ohtani story. He's going to be the very first story. Think about this, Tone. He's going to be the very first story that Major League Baseball has had where all of a sudden, after October in the World Series, baseball goes into hibernation. During the football season, there's actually going to be a baseball story on what the Angels do with Shohei Ohtani. For the first time, there's going to be off-season noise for baseball. It's a great thing for baseball because it goes into hibernation and the NFL dominates everything in the fall. Baseball's never heard of until you get to the spring meetings and you get into the winter meetings. You never hear anything. But you're going to hear a player who's going to sign a 10-year, $600 million contract, and he'll be the richest North American athlete in any sport. He's going to make north of $60 million per year, depending on what market he's in, but it's going to be a story. It's going to be a story. Baseball doesn't have very many. I thought the All-Star game was great. Always is, But to me, when I was a kid, it was hey, those of you that are my age, north of 50, let me say this to you. The baseball all-star game, as good as that thing was last night, that's not like it used to be when we were raised and watching all those superstars play in the National League and the American League. When they did, and you guys do know what changed interleague play. I don't think you guys understand what happened. Don't you remember the home run race between Sosa and McGwire? The American League benefited nothing from that. There was no interleague play. And all the superstars that were in the National League at the time, Bonds and all those guys, were on one side of the aisle of the National League. The American League really didn't have guys in a home run chase. So what they wanted to do was be able to kind of like generate their superstars throughout the entire majors instead of just on one side. And it was just the National League. It was Cardinals and Cubs. And that home run race in 98 changed baseball into viewing habits forever. You used to stop in a bar and they would do cutaways. They were major networks doing cutaways on Sosa McGuire's home run chase. Major cutaways. You'd be watching a television show. They do a cutaway. He's on Maris's number. How's it going, Ray? Baseball now, the greatest story of all time is Ohtani. Hey, and you want to hear something that's even more? We'll move on to football here in a second. We're 15 days out now from the start of training camp. You want to hear something? In 6 years, Shohei Ohtani's been in Los Angeles with the Angels. They've never finished above 500. So you didn't win with him. You got a trading deadline coming up. If you let him walk in the offseason, you get nothing for him and you never did anything with him. If you're Artie Moreno, the owner of the Angels, you got to put on the gas pedal and ask his people right now, hey, do you plan on testing free agency? And if you do, you got to start the process of moving this guy and get something for him. The Angels could probably set themselves up for the next 10 years with a treasure trove of picks or players for Ohtani. He's going to command the team's future. And if the Angels are smart, they move him. Here's what you do. Think about it, Tone. Think about it. Anybody who's a baseball fan. What did you do with Mike Trout? If you're Ohtani's people, you had both those guys on your team. The two best players in the game. And you can't do shit with them. That shows you how hard baseball is, dude. If you have the two best football players on your team, you're going to be competitive. The Angels aren't competitive. Okay, I would trade Tout and Ohtani for the biggest haul in Major League Baseball history. Dude, watch this. Asking the Yankees for Aaron Judge is not out of the realm of possibilities. Who would you rather have on your team, Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani? Who would you rather have on your team in Philly, Bryce Harper or Shohei Ohtani? It's not out of the realm of possibilities. There's nobody in baseball that is not tradable with that guy. Nolan Arenado, St. Louis, would you trade him for Ohtani? Of course you would, and that still wouldn't. Here's something to think about for the Phillies. If the Angels called the Phillies, and they don't have anything on their farm system, so they're not in the room here. They got money, but they have no draft pick. Well, they got draft picks. Okay? So you call Dave Dombrowski up and you go, hey, I'll trade you Shohei Ohtani for 6 first-rounders and Bryce Harper. Would you do it? You bet your ass you're going to do it. He's going to win you 15 games and hit you 50 homers. There's nobody that will make a bigger impact on your baseball team than Ohtani because he pitches and he hits. He's an impact guy. JM would keep Harper over Ohtani. Of course he would. Again, right? Okay, let's move on here. What up, keyboard? Appreciate it. Guy's a special player, man. The Angels could turn around their entire franchise if they trade Ohtani. He's going to re-sign. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Why would you stay in Los Angeles and be with the Angels when the Angels are a non-factor in that market? Okay? All right, let's move on here. 60 names have been released on the Hall of Fame. Jason Cole will be with us in hour number 3 at 5:30. I saw Roone Arledge's name on that list. I don't know if any of you actually know the story. Roone Arledge was a friend of mine and actually a guy who got – do you guys know who got me into broadcasting? Have I told the story before who got me into broadcasting? Do you guys know who helped facilitate my start into my career? Do you guys know who helped me? Do you guys know who helped me start in broadcasting? I had a lot of help from key people. And actually, Roone Arledge was also a key factor in my development. Here's who helped me get involved. When I was a young guy and I lived in Stamford, Connecticut, a friend of mine by the name of Doc Santinella was a dentist in Westport, and he was a big Maryland. That's how he got to Maryland. He was a big-time Maryland alum. This is really how I got there. And he had been recruiting me since my sophomore year. Well, he was actually best friends with Jim McKay. Jim McKay lived in Westport. And Doc Santinella would bring occasionally Jim McKay to my high school football games. And I became friends with Jim McKay and the McManus family. We would go fishing. My grandfather loved him. Doc Santinella loved the fact that Jim McKay would come to my games, friends with the Robustellis. And I got a chance numerous times to go fishing with Jim McKay on Doc Santinella's pond that he had in his backyard. It was a really giant lake, and it was really awesome. And we had a great time. And I was always really cool, and it was kind of crazy because my high school teammates knew that Jim McKay used to come and see me. And this is the face of wide world of sports. Like, Jim McKay would come from Lillehammer or some crazy place. And there would Jim McKay be with Doc Santinella on a Saturday afternoon watching me play football. It was crazy. And that's how I became friends with Sean McManus, who's been on this network at least 5 times. He's a chairman of CBS Sports. So, after I got done with my my pro football career, I contacted Jim McKay and I said, Jim, can you help me? And he goes, absolutely. You want to be in broadcasting? You've always said this. And I was like this. I said, okay. And so, he introduced me to Roone Arledge. And then Roone Arledge introduced me to everybody at ABC Sports. Frank Gifford, who was also a friend of my uncle, Andy Robustelli, also put a word in for Roone Arledge. So I go up and meet. I think Roone at the time was the chairman of ABC News. He had made the transition from ABC Sports to ABC News. And I went up and met him, and he goes, go see Jack O'Hara. I think I've told you guys this part of the story. It's a really tragic ending to this thing. But Jack O'Hara was the head of ABC Sports after Roone had gone to ABC News. And I was friends with Jack O'Hara, and unfortunately, I think I've told some of you this, but Jack O'Hara was in a TWA flight 800 with his family that exploded over Long Island Sound. And I had met him. He says, when I get back from the French Open, he had his entire family with him. We'll talk about you joining ABC Sports in Saturday college football as a sideline reporter. And unfortunately, Jack O'Hara was killed in that flight. And I never had the gonads to call Roone back because I just thought it was uncool. I mean, I was going to be on ABC Sports and I was going to be a sideline reporter. Crazy how life. I had just talked to him before he took off for Paris for the French Open. And we had a great lunch. We talked, and ABC was going to hire me. And I just never called ABC back. Okay? Just never called them back. But Roone was so great. And you got to remember Roone Arledge, man. The guy's a founder of Monday Night Football. Everyone remembers those tones. Dude, this guy was one of the absolute greats of all time. So, okay, so let's move on from that, but I'm glad to see Roone Arledge, and his name is on the contributors list because he should be a Hall of Famer. His impact on the National Football League and on Monday Night Football. Monday Night doesn't have the same star that it used to have, but what he did for football and what he did for ABC's Monday Night Football with Cosell and Gifford and Don Meredith, that will always be entrenched in the history of the National Football League. Just really absolutely, okay? I mean, unbelievable. Okay, so let's do this. We've been going over Eagle position rooms and the opponents that you guys are going to play. And I'm going to look at week 9 here in a second. That's the Dallas Cowboys. And so we're going to look at that. We're also going to look at the cornerback room. And we're going to look at your cornerback position as we're now, 15 days out from the start of training camp. All right. Let's start here. And by the way, there was a comment that a guy made about Eagle fans. from San Francisco. Awesome. My God almighty, you Eagle fans are incredibly hated. I love it. I love it. Guy calls you scumbags. I'm going to get into it in a minute here, and I'll talk. I love it. You should laugh at that. They're just making the game bigger. Don't act like it's a rival and it'll piss them off more. Don't give in. Don't argue back with an inferior opponent. The Cowboys are your only rival. The rest of them are roadkill. Roadkill. The Niners are roadkill. Treat them that way. They'll hate you more. Let me start there instead of going into the Cowboys first, because we'll get into them. So this sportscaster out at the game in San Francisco, and I worked in that market. I actually like it. Called the Eagle fans, and I'm not going to go all into it, scumbags. And I saw the back and forth. I'm like, don't give in to that. Treat them like they're roadkill. You will piss them off more when you don't acknowledge them. We crushed you in the NFC title game. We beat the fuck out of your quarterback. Your coach and your wide receiver are crying the entire offseason. Why in the world would I come down to your level? I wouldn't. Man, I'll tell you something, Eagle fans. You're better than I thought. I admire it now. I thought you just jumped on Sills' shit. You got a guy 3,500 miles away calling you a scumbag? That's so great. Holy shit, do I love that. Bro, go have a parade. That's all San Francisco has today. They put stupid parades on, and they've got tents in the street. You don't have a football team that can beat us. You don't have a quarterback that will beat us. Why am I acknowledging you again? Well, if we would have had Joe Namath or Joe Montana or Steve Young, we would have beat you. I'm like, dude, you need a binky and a whoopee and like a bassinet to lay your little head in. Dude, okay, Eagle fans, man, I admire you, man. Congratulations. You have pissed off an entire city organization to the point where they can't stand you. Oh, my God. I used to love that type of reputation. I embrace that type of reputation. I want people to hate me. I want every time I step on the field, you look at me as your biggest game, not me looking at you as the biggest game. My biggest game every year is the team in Dallas. You are roadkill. Okay? Hey, I say go put a parade. I tweeted out, dude, go put a parade on. That's all you're good at. Go, because you're not good at building quarterbacks anymore. Okay? And you're not even really the San Francisco 49ers. You're the Santa Clara Niners. That's where they serve those little wiener dogs on toothpicks and white wine spritzers. You see, in Philly, they eat hot dogs and drink beer like men. They don't eat little wiener dogs and drink white wine spritzers with a lime in it. Nobody does that in Philly. You might get your ass kicked if you brought a white wine spritzer into Section 43. Nobody drinks white wine spritzers. at Lincoln Financial. I guarantee they don't even sell white wine spritzers. In San Francisco, they probably got an entire floor of white wine spritzers. Okay? Little wiener dogs. I guarantee you, they serve caviar there too. They got to. I mean, you brought me caviar at a football game, I'd punch you in the face. Dude, bring me a hot dog, and I want a ballpark hot dog, and I want a beer. I want to be fed like a man, not like a guy who drinks white wine spritzers. Come on, man. Could you see a guy in Philly, Tone, with a white wine spritzer with his thumb like this? He's got a white wine spritzer with his hand up like this. Hey, man, can you believe it? What's going on in the third quarter? Can you? I can't believe Kyle Shanahan is wearing that shirt the way he's wearing it. He should have his top buttoned all the time. I mean, I don't know about you, man. White wine spritzers. Oh, man. San Francisco. Don't worry about it. It's the Cowboys, man. It's the Dallas Cowboys. That's your rival. The Eagle fans are mean and scumbags. Oh. Hey, can you imagine you're sitting in the stands and you're a Niner fan and you looked over and called an Eagle fan a scumbag and mean? You know what he would look at you and say? Thanks. Thanks. And where are you from again? Oh, you're from the weird coast. The West Coast, right? It's not the West Coast. It's the weird coast. Oh, yeah. You're from the weirdo coast. You know, there's East Coast, and then there's weirdo coast. So you're from the weirdo coast. Okay. Yeah, all right. White wine spritzers. Dude, they didn't even serve white wine spritzers at Raider games. You had Hell's Angel guys show up. That's why I love Raider fan, too. Raider fan, man. Get this. You had guys on Harleys, and you had Hell's Angels guys, Sonny Berger and all them guys. They would show up on their Harleys and their Indians, and they would have American Express cards. Craziest thing you've ever seen. Here's a guy buying beer. So Hell's Angel guy's buying me a beer at the Oakland Alameda Coliseum, right? Pulls out of American Express. I'm like, now that's dope. This guy's got an AE card, and he's on an Indian, and he's got an Hell's Angels patch. I'm like, holy shit. But if you go to Niner games, cheese, white wine spritzers, and can I have a napkin? Dude, nobody serves napkins at a football game. You don't get napkins at a football game. Can I have a napkin and a white wine spritzer and a little wiener dog? Can I have a couple napkins, please? No, you don't get napkins at football games because you smear it on your face. You have hot dog juice you got it all over you. It's on your shirt because you eat like a man and a football fan. Come on, man. White wine spritzers. But you guys are scumbags. Thank you. Sills has jewels the size of pool balls. Absolutely. And they click together, my friend, when you know I'm coming. How you doing? Boom! Let's get to the Cowboys here. All right. Enough with those dudes. The 40 whiners. From now on, they're the 40 whiners. Well, you know, they're scumbags and they're mean in Philly. Thank you. You're a scumbag. Really? Who's calling me that? A guy who lives in a tent and has parades in the Castro every day. It's all right. I'm all right with you calling me anything. You call me anything you want. Just don't call me on the phone. Call me anything you want. Niner fans. Really? Yeah. They got to get in their BMWs and their Ferraris and drive down to Santa Clara through wine country to get to the stadium. You got to go over to 95. You got to kind of go down into the section down there where Wells Fargo is to get to Lincoln Financial. I've actually been there a bunch of times. All right, let's move on. I'm sick of those guys. I'm totally sick of them. All right, Cowboys. You do agree with me. The Cowboys are your biggest rival. It's not the 40-winers. It's the Cowboys because of the success that they've had against you. I'll ask you this question before I go into how I'm looking at the 2023 Dallas Cowboys. Have they closed the gap to you guys? This offseason, have they closed the gap and have the Eagles kind of come back a little bit because of some of the losses on defense? Have they? Okay. Have they closed the gap? Have they? How good are the, by the way, 2 straight years of 12 wins. 2021 and 2022, the Cowboys 12-win team. So it's like the first time in a while they've shown some consistency. Has Dallas closed the gap on Philly? Okay. Have they? No, but they're not far behind us. Jerry Jones is still alive. Yes, he is, champion. Yes, he is. Okay. Here's my takeaway of the Cowboys and how I see them on July 12th. By the way, we're going to look at the Eagle corners here in a bit too, as we're looking at position rooms here, okay? So here's the Cowboys. The Cowboys just don't win big games. I can't think of the last big game that they were in that they won that mattered. And I'm not talking regular season. In the last 26 years, what's the biggest game they've been in? I can't pick one. I actually can't think of one. In 26 years, maybe the divisional game against the Packers at Lambeau was probably the biggest game that they were in with a true shot to maybe win a Super Bowl. Okay? Other than that, I can't think of a game that they were in where I went, hey, man, the Cowboys just won a giant game. They do not win big games like the Eagles do. The Eagles win. The Niners win big games. The Niners, the Seahawks, and the Eagles in the NFC win big games in the last 25 years. They win. Cowboys don't. Think of it. 49ers won an NFC title game, and they won another one with Harbaugh. Okay, so I mean, at least they're winning big games, getting to the big game. Seahawks have won a Super Bowl, been to the big game. Holmgren even brought them. The Eagles, their record speaks for itself since 2000. What's the Cowboys done? What have the Cowboys done in 26 years? So we start there. And as I said, 2 straight years of 12 wins, what's it resulted in? Underachieving. Jerry Jones has now owned the team for 34 years and has not been able to duplicate what he did early on in his first 6 years owning the team. They've just not been able to do it. Forte, San Francisco has a phenomenal Italian festival. I've been to it. It's fantastic. North Park is absolutely sensational. North Park is great. It's a great Italian section. Very underrated and really awesome. Absolutely. Pasta Pomodoro up there. The church is up there too. It's where DiMaggio's from too, by the way. Cowboys offense, Mike McCarthy takes over the play calling. Brian Schottenheimer has also been brought in as OC. Dan Quinn's over on the defensive side. Would you guys agree with me in Dallas last year? The Cowboys missed Amari Cooper. And I thought that was evident early. Do you guys agree? The Cowboys missed Amari Cooper. I thought you saw that early on in the season, that he was missed. Okay? Now, they had to get rid of him because of the $20 million number. And I think they kept the wrong guy. I think they should have jettisoned Ezekiel Elliott and kept Amari Cooper and ate the money on Zeke because it affected Dak. Okay? It affected Dak Prescott. Cowboys should win 13 games, but maybe win 11 if they're lucky. Eagle. Here, Michael Gallup was awful all year long. He was just awful. Him and Dak never really connected. I thought there was a better connection with Michael Gallup and Cooper Rush than actually with Dak Prescott. Michael Gallup, to me, in my opinion, his 2022 campaign was not very good. And quite frankly, that's why they went out and got Brandon Cooks, and they needed to upgrade the position. It became the Tony Pollard show. It totally became the Tony Pollard show. Catching footballs out of the backfield, running with the football. It was the Tony Pollard show. And when Zeke ended up getting hurt, that was really the end of Ezekiel Elliott, because you saw what he brought to the team. You could put him in the slot. You could line him up out wide, run him in between the tackles. He was a running back version of Deebo Samuel. Okay? And it was greasy good for Cleveland because he still had 1,000 yards in Cleveland too as a wide receiver there. So he was missed in Dallas. And that's why the addition of Brandon Cooks. Here's what they did do, though. They did end Brady's NFL career 31-14. They beat the Buccaneers, but I don't think anyone looks at that and goes, that's a giant win. It was a playoff win, which is important. But that Buccaneer team was pretty much out of gas. And they did win it on the road. Then they had to play and turn around and play against San Francisco. Okay? Then they turned around and had to play San Fran. And that was a really physical football game between the Niners and the Cowboys. It was a pretty good football game, which the Niners ended up coming out on top, obviously. Here's the one thing, though, with Dallas. Does Dallas have a Super Bowl defense? I think they do. But what is the one stat that is the most unpredictable stat when you're talking? Do you guys know what the most unpredictable stat is when it comes to playing defense in the NFL? What's the most unpredictable stat that people sometimes bring up all the time? What's the most unpredictable statistic that a defensive football team can have? And that you should never rely on it. You should never rely on this one stat. Exactly, turnovers. They had a lot of turnovers. You know how that goes in peaks and valleys? Some years you have some years the ball doesn't bounce your way. You can't count on that. The only two things that you can count on are defending the run and defending the pass. That's it. If you're counting on turnovers, you're not building a good defense. Turnovers come and go. If you're lucky to get it on the other end, hey, good for you if your turnover ratio is high. But it's the most unpredictable statistic that you will put on a defense each and every single year. Oh, we're going to count for a lot of turnovers. No, you're not. You have no idea about that statistic, but you can do something about stopping the run and being better in your pass defense. Okay? Seals, personally, I believe Dak is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. He's a top 10 quarterback who just didn't have a top 10 season last year. But there comes to a point in a player's career when you have to stop talking about how many numbers he puts up. We know what Dak is, capable of statistically doing it, but now it's about winning the big games, bringing something to true value to Dallas. He just hasn't proven he can do that. And I've said this yesterday to you. McNabb had a better career than Dak. Okay? McNabb won more. McNabb won. Hey, you know what the one thing Eagle guy does? He lost this NFC Championship game. Didn't play well in this NFC Championship game. Played pretty decent in this NFC Championship game. Didn't play that great in the Super Bowl. At least he got there. At least he put his team in contention every year. It's just the Cowboys' best chance at Super Bowl was 2016. They had everything working for them. I think Dak has a little similarities to Wentz because he has shown he can't play lights out. He has peaked. The Phillies, we're here. We're here with him. We're here. And I agree with you in tone. Ace, I agree with you in tone. Dude, if not now, when? If he doesn't do it now, he'll never do it. You know how many times you see quarterbacks like Jonathan Gannon who go through 7, 8 teams and then win an MVP late in your career when you're 35, 36 years old and you lead a team to a Super Bowl? You know how rare that is? That is one of the rarest things you can do. Like all of a sudden, Dak's going to turn a switch and he's going to be Roger Staubach or Troy Aikman. I don't know. And if I'm saying I don't know after all these years, I'm not paying you $49 million. Like, let me say this to you. Here's what I would do. If this guy doesn't win this year, I start looking around the room and I start looking at places like Green Bay and I start looking at places like Tampa Bay and I start looking at places like maybe Arizona that have draft commodities that I could trade this guy to so I can rebuild the quarterback position. If Brock Purdy could get to an NFC title game, making $900,000, I could do that as well by being a team that built my team the same way that the Eagles, the Patriots, and Seattle built their team as they were waiting for their quarterbacks to mature into their contracts. Dallas overpays at key positions all the time. They're going to overpay Micah Parsons. They're going to make Micah Parsons the highest paid defensive player in the league. He's not the best player in the league. When I'm paying Aaron Donald $30 million a year, Aaron Donald's the best defensive player in the league. I have to pay that. When I see the numbers that Davante Adams puts up, no matter if it's Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr, I know what I'm getting with him. But at wide receiver, you know the only wide receiver that has actually made their quarterback better last year was A.J. Brown. Think of it. What did Tyreek Hill deliver for Miami at $25 million? Nothing. What did Davante Adams deliver in Las Vegas? Nothing, and the quarterback got fired. Hopkins just got fired in Arizona. AJ's the only guy. You know why? Because Tennessee underutilized him, didn't know what they had. Philly knew what he was, turned him into what he was, and let him be who he was, and it made Jalen Hurts a better season, and it made him a better player. Those are all the facts that, see, again, here's something that I'm doing here. I'm telling you exactly what things and how it played out. Here's what you got going on in Minnesota with Justin Jefferson. Jefferson is the Kirk Cousins version of the wide receiver position. Hoss, you can have all those numbers. You can have all those catches. You could be on pace for the greatest numbers of all time. What separates you from Jerry Rice? Jerry Rice had Joe Montana, who won ball games. Your guy doesn't. He'll have the empty calorie stats that Tim Brown had in Oakland with the Raiders. Okay? He'll have the same numbers as Tim Brown. I don't ever remember Tim Brown in a game that mattered. Somehow he got to the Hall of Fame. Sure. With no impact in the game at all. Zero impact. Quan goes, he had Bill Walsh. Okay. Bill Walsh and Joe Montana and Jerry Rice. Well, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Sure. And let's not forget, Quan, Bill Walsh drafted a guy that no one wanted. Walsh looked at it. You don't draft a wide receiver that runs a 4.8 and a 40. Bill Walsh saw through that. You think Howie Roseman would have drafted Jerry Rice at the combines if Rice ran a 4.8? Ask yourself that. You think Howie would have drafted Jerry Rice? Jerry Rice ran a 4.8. I had a faster 40. Ran a 4.8 at the combines. Okay? Bill Walsh went like this. This guy's hands are too good. I don't ever remember Jerry Rice getting caught in games. Why he ran a 4.8 at the combines, I have no idea how that played out like that. Okay? Yeah. Well, Bill Walsh got John Taylor in the 3rd round. Dude. So, again, you got to win big games. And I agree with you guys. Dak, this is the year of dude, there is more pressure on Dak Prescott than any quarterback in the NFL, and that includes Aaron Rodgers. Because he plays for the most famous franchise in American sports, the Dallas Cowboys, on the #1 network, on the #1 sports league. He's got to win. Look, I look at, and here's this. Michael Gallup's got to play better. For the Cowboys to be in a conversation to beat the Eagles, Dak's got to have a turnaround year. Gallup's got to be better, and the defense has to stay where they were a year ago. Now, they're going to have a tough schedule, too, the same way that the Eagles have. Okay? But at the end of the day, Dallas has to win games that matter, dude. And it can't just be the Eagles. You know what's funny? The Cowboys are built to beat the Eagles. And they have. Whether you like to hear that or not, those are the facts. That destroys you. They're almost non-competitive games. But then he turns around the next week and does what Tone says. And then lays an egg against the Jets. A bad Jet team a couple of years ago. Or only puts up 3 points against the Saints. Okay? I mean, they're just not consistent. They're just not good enough in big games. They're just not good enough. Where the Eagles, see, here's the Eagles' heartbeat. Here's the Eagles' heartbeat in a season. Right there, playing at their level all the time. Very rarely do they drop down to an opponent's ability. They're more up here. They hang out here. Here's Dallas. Can't win championships like that. You got to play at an even keel, man. Now, again, if injuries on your team are going to drop you down sometimes, obviously. But that's not what that case is. You know how Dallas gets beat? Dallas gets beat with inconsistent play calling, overpaying players. Because you know why? What was the name of that guy, the linebacker they gave all that money to? Jalen, what was his name? They gave him all that money and he turned out to be a gigantic turd. Okay? Dally Green says that I said Dallas's D-line's better. Yeah. Yeah, it is. They got better ends and they got better tackles. You may at the end of the year have better tackles, but we don't know yet. You're going into the season not knowing shit. I know what they did last year. They were 4th in defense last year. They weren't horrible. Okay? They were not horrible. Okay? Jalen Smith. That's it. Jalen Smith. Thank you, Izzy. They weren't horrible. Okay? Their defenses, they got a Super Bowl defense. July 27th, keyboard. So, overall, again, this is the year of Dak. This is the year of Dak Prescott. Okay?